This is Jillian Hartley from Arkansas Northeastern College. I'm doing an interview today with Deanita Hicks. It is September 11th, 2024. And Deanita is my guest today here because she is somebody who has had about a 50-year connection with Arkansas Northeastern College. And so, Deanita, we're going to kind of start off a little bit about just, your early life. You're somebody who came from the Missouri Boot Heel. So can you tell us, where were you born? What's the area where you grew up there?
I was born at the Chickasaw Hospital in Blytheville, Arkansas. That's what it was called back then. And I lived in Blytheville for a few years, 2 or 3 years maybe, when I was little, and my father worked as a body man at different places in Blytheville. And then I mainly went to Missouri, and I went to like 8 or 9 different schools throughout my life. We moved a lot. And I ended up back in Arkansas in 3rd grade at Burdett. And then I went back to Missouri, and I've always lived within 25 miles of the college my whole life.
Well, and of course you have kind of a sizable family.
Mm-hmm.
What can you describe the makeup of your family?
Yeah, my mom and dad got married when he met her at the Blytheville Airforce Base, or she met him there. And they got married, and before she was 27 or 8, she had had 5 children. Really 6. One died in the hospital as a tiny baby. But I was the oldest of 5, and I had a sister, Cindy, who is now passed on, who was my probably best friend. And then I have a brother, Bucky. He's the only boy. And I have a sister, Gina, and then the baby sister, Dana, who's also an educator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So education's always been something very important to you.
Yeah.
So can you just sort of give us a little bit of your educational background?
Mm-hmm.
We'll obviously get into the stuff about MCCC, but what kind of education did you have up through high school?
Okay. For one thing, I want to mention that ever since I could remember anything, I knew I was going to be a teacher of some kind. And I would make my brothers and sisters take spelling tests. I found the little spelling book the other day when I was cleaning out a room. I found the little spelling book that I always gave them spelling tests from. And I thought it was important to read stories and talk about what happened in them and all of that. So I knew I was going to be a teacher. So when MCCC opened up in 1975, well, I graduated in 1975, and then I turned 18 in July, and then that August I started to school at ANC, and I got 2 really good years there with great instructors, and the good thing was it was fresh and new and just beginning. Everybody was open-minded. Everybody wanted it to succeed. We were all a very happy bunch of people.
Well, let me ask you a question, because that's, the institution had just started
Mm-hmm.
when you enrolled. So do you remember how you heard about it?
Well, I started hearing it on the news. I kept saying, they're saying they're going to have a college in Blytheville. And I was just ready to go off to college to become a teacher. And I just thought that was miraculous. I had just gotten married. I was married very young. And I thought this would be perfect for me. I could stay home and help my husband on the farm, but I could also be going to school. And we didn't do internet and things, so it was actually, you had to be there all the time, and it was 5 days a week and all of that. And I remember thinking how lucky I was that the year I decided to go to college, which I was going to go anyway, but this school opened up within 20 miles of my house.
Was this 1975?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
And it was so exciting because I remember going to register for school, and some of my future teachers, very soon future teachers, like Mary Alice DeMint and others, were painting the building and fixing things up, and I didn't know they would be my teachers. I thought they were just people working to get the building ready. And then when I went into the classrooms, these were the people who were getting the building ready. They were people who were so excited about the college being there. that they actually were getting things ready for us. And then when we went, there they were.
There they were. The
Yeah.
person painting
I
is
thought that
suddenly
was
your
so
English
crazy.
teacher.
Yeah.
So did you though? So the college was not open its original building when you started.
No, it was at Sudbury at an old high school.
An old
building.
high school.
Or I think it was an old high school.
Downtown.
Uh-huh.
How long do you remember did it take for you to? Did you go there for a semester, 2
I
semesters?
went 2 years there because
Okay.
I got my Associate of Arts degree there, and that's where we went. We didn't have the new building or any of that. We were still in that building for that 2 years. And the amazing thing is, we had drama, we had cheerleaders, we had basketball, we had entertainers come into this little room where people hung out and drank sodas and talked. We had great camaraderie with the instructors because it was so small, and we would all sit at tables and talk, and we had speakers come, and it was such a busy time. I don't know how in the world they got all that organized so fast.
Do you think, because this, what is now Arkansas Northeastern College, when it was MCCC, Mississippi County Community College, there was a rather large grant for a solar panel project, because you're talking about people coming in. I'm wondering, do you remember much about the project or what you heard about it?
Mainly what I heard about it, because I think I was going to ASU by then when that all became such a big deal. But I remember from the beginning that was sort of important, and I thought that was pretty earth-shaking, big deal that we had solar panels out at the new building and all that. But I just, that wasn't the thing that stuck out to me until later.
So, you have a lot of groups and stuff. I've been told recently that MCCC actually first started off as the Cherokee before they were the Sons. Do you remember that?
Yes, I've got the yearbook.
Really?
It's a little paperback yearbook that's about as thick as a small magazine, and I'm in it, and other people are in it, and it was the coolest thing because that's another thing about ANC. It was so small at that time. I had been to several different schools in my life, so I wasn't afraid of meeting people and talking to people. But it was so welcoming and so warm, and I would walk in, and I instantly either knew some people from community, or I've met lots of people that became my friends. And it was one of the funnest times of my life. And I was married, but it was just a fun time to be there.
And it sounds like you adjusted then to college.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely
I
well.
really well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think ANC helped with, MCCC at the time helped with that, because then when I went off to ASU, it didn't seem so daunting to me, and I don't think I would have been that scared anyway because I was so excited. But being at MCCC for 2 years before that really did make me less worried about anything that could happen.
Right. That's great.
Because it was a safety net.
And so kind of moving, because you go off to Arkansas State.
Uh-huh.
So you fulfilled your passion. You became a teacher.
Yes.
Where did you teach first?
I taught at Cooter High School. And really, honestly, one semester I took off and I taught at Hornersville. I didn't teach, but I ran the library when a lady was very ill and she later died. But I spent a semester at the library at Hornersville. And then I went to Cooter, and my stepdaughter was taking piano lessons from Peggy Holmes, who was the secretary from way back till after I left. And she told me that I ought to look into teaching there. Well, I didn't have my degree yet, but I ended up working with 3rd and 4th graders because Miss Ray, my 3rd grade teacher, needed someone to help her because she had a combined classroom of 3rd and 4th. And she wanted to teach the 3rd grade and wanted me to teach the 4th grade. And I had enough fires I could do it, but I didn't have my degree yet. But I loved it. It was so much fun. And then the first year I taught there, I taught 6th grade half the day. And then the principal, who was also my principal when I went to school, taught the other half of the day. And then I went over to the high school that half of the day. And then I continued teaching in the high school for about 9-10 years.
Did you want to, were you hoping at some point to move to the college environment?
Well, as I got a little bit into my work, at about the 5th year, I got tenure in Missouri, and I thought, oh, this is a big deal. But I started thinking about, I want a bigger challenge. I want to teach older people. I want to teach material that I still love, because you can get bored teaching the same thing that you already know really well for all those years. And I wasn't really bored. Cooter was a wonderful place to work. I loved it. But I thought, I'd like to teach on the college level. And the cool thing is, I went to, they asked me to teach French at Cooter. I didn't know how to teach French, but they wanted me to do it for a couple of years. And I had French for reading knowledge in my master's degree, because I was working on my master's. Mm-hmm. So I went ahead and tried to teach French, and of course I knew more than the students did. But I was going to take a class at ANC with Marcia McLean, because she did teach French, and it was a night class. In fact, that's all we used to have as night classes. We didn't have internet, so we had night classes. I went to her class, and one night Mary Alice DeMint, who had been my English teacher, came in to evaluate Marcia McLean. And she said, "Deanita." And I said, "Miss DeMint." And we, talked about old times, and she said, "Well, what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I teach English, and I'm working on my master's degree." She said, "Oh, why don't you come teach some classes for me?" I said, "I would love that." So I got my foot in the door, and I started teaching night classes, and I loved it. And by the time I finished my master's degree, they needed an English teacher, and I was the one.
So your English teacher at MCCC basically discovered you, brought you back, Mary DeMint, and then you basically started teaching English.
Yeah,
and you did
she became my boss.
She became your boss. So you kind of shared some of the things about your early years at the college as a student. So describe some of the early years as a faculty member.
Okay. First of all, I loved every minute of it. I remember that because of my high school experience, I was always making lesson plans. No college teachers did that I knew of, but I was always making lesson plans thinking I've got to be ready when I walk in that classroom. And then it got to where it was an informal kind of, I would put in my little book, do this today, make sure to make this point, blah, blah, blah. So I'd quit doing big lesson plans, but my first whole year there was so fun because I got to go through all the books I was going to use, and I got to figure out how I was going to teach them, and I did it day by day because I just got the job, and there I was, and it was wonderful, and it was a lovely experience, and I had some of the best friends in the world there, and the students were lovely. They were wonderful. And I never really had a run-in with any student during those first several years because I looked at them as people who were just like me. They were young. I was young. I had degrees, or a degree. I had degrees, and they didn't, but I never thought of them as being beneath me, or I just always treated them like they were equals to me. And a lot of teachers don't like that philosophy, but it just felt right. And it worked because I was going through things recently and looking at all my old evaluations and throwing away all the numbers, but keeping the sheets where people wrote things. They wrote the nicest things about me, things that I don't even know were true, but they said things like, "Miss Hicks is one of the most relatable," Miss Jones at the time, is one of the most relatable people I've ever been in class with. I've learned more from her than anybody in all of my years of high school, and I just loved that.
Well, and being somebody who was at one time your colleague, and then at one time under your supervision, it was not uncommon for people to come back who said, "I had you were so great," because you care so much, and your love and passion for writing and literature is just, it just shines. So looking at the early period, too, at the development of the college. So when you started the college, I believe the president was it still Harry Smith?
Sullins.
Or it was
Dr.
John Sullins.
Uh-huh.
Are there any kind of people from that early period as far as the early development that stand out to you? Other faculty members? Because you still come in when the college is still relatively young. Or anybody who stands out?
79.
Yeah.
Was it 79? Yeah, because I taught from...
Because you taught part-time for several years before coming in full-time.
89.
Okay.
I get it all mixed up now that I'm older. But, there were lots of really standout people. People that I remember most of all, Dr. Johnson, who was a great instructor. I had him for biology, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure I learned a lot because I seem to have a pretty good grasp of science, but I thought he was one of the most fun people on earth. I loved him. Annie Heath was my idol. I thought she was a beautiful person. I thought she was classy. She was smart. She really influenced me as far as the way you should act. And one time she said to me, when I was teaching, she came through a hallway and she said, "Your shoes look nice." I said, "Thank you." She said, "You should always wear good shoes. People always notice that." And as you know, I'm a shoeaholic. And I don't know if it's because of what she said or what, but I love good shoes. And I remember Annie Heath being a huge influence and open-minded and smart. And Mary DeMint, she was one of the best English teachers I've ever had as far as making it relevant and making the classroom a fun place to be. She was stellar.
Well, of course, the mission of the college is one that is, initially it's established like many community colleges throughout the country. It is somewhat fueled by the creation of Pell Grants. Mm-hmm. And so, that early mission, of course, looking throughout the history of the college and your time from a student on, can you testify to the mission of community colleges and also maybe talk a little bit about how they've evolved over the years?
I don't remember the very first mission by heart, but I remember that we were there to promote lifelong learning and that we were there to be convenient for people and we were there to accommodate people. And I don't think we've lost that. And in fact, I think when the mission changed just a little bit several years in, it still had the same elements, but it mentioned accessibility. And I think that was the modern look at the way things would become more internet involved. And I remember having a typewriter in my office the first few years, and then I suddenly got a computer and you touch the keys and it would go crazy, and I had to get used to that. I know that shows my age, but that accessibility part got to be really important, and especially during COVID. Accessibility, how can you get students to be able to go to school even if they can't come to the building and even if they can't do everything there at the building? Because we have students who are married, who are working, who had children, who there wouldn't have been any way that some people would have gotten their degrees if they had to depend on regular classroom instruction there at the building, and especially at night like we used to do. Our internet used to be night classes.
Right.
And, in the sense that that's what was convenient for a lot of people out there who could come to college.
And community colleges usually are at the forefront of flexibility and trying to find ways to do that. And you kind of also talk a little bit about teaching practices, and you've seen a lot of evolution of those over the years. So something I want to kind of throw out at you, because I know how much you love studying about different generations. Mm-hmm. So you have taught a number of generations.
Yes.
And you are also an optimist, and you see the best in people and younger people.
And I have a younger person. I have a 25-year-old son.
So when you kind of look at the student base in the late 80s to the 90s and to the early 2000s, could you see some changes and some influences culturally in the patterns?
Big time. Because at the beginning, and I was probably different from the beginning than a lot of teachers, and I hate to say this because people will think, oh, she's just bragging. But from the beginning, I always looked at students as people who were just people like me. And I may have had more degrees, I know I did, because they were in my classes, but I always had great respect for them taking the time to come to classes and get degrees and take care of their families. But what's changed over the years, I think, is that we become more, and I'm not sure if this is bad or good, more customer-based instead of, it used to be people came to us and they would look to us for the knowledge so they could get the degree. Now it's more like, or it seemed like when I left the college, when I retired, that we were customer-based and it was almost like a business. It was like we had to be careful about what we said or did and how we approach things, because these were our customers, and if our customers don't come back, we don't have a job. And one thing that I think came from that, and it kind of bothers me, is the lack of study in the humanities, because I think the humanities are probably more important now than they've ever been in our whole history, because we need to know how other people live, how other people feel. We need to be able to talk about those things. We can't just do all business and all computers and all career. We have to have a people-centered education, in my opinion.
And that's...
And I think that's been lost in some ways.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been changes, and a lot of them have been geared more toward getting people to work real fast.
Yes,
and
speed.
And at
the cost of
what do you then cut out? And then it's like, oh, well, do you really need literature courses?
What do you do for enjoyment in your life?
Right. And I can, and I know. I'm pretty confident too. You're somebody who very early on was influenced by literature, and I believe Victor Hugo.
Les Miserables.
You're living in the Boot Heel. You have a large family, and you're introduced to this French writer who kind of put you on a path. Am I correct? Of connecting with other people and stations. And
my grandfather, who was really just my step-grandfather, but he's the only grandfather I ever really knew, I loved him more than anybody in the world, and he would say to people, I'm the apple of his eye. He loved me too. I was the first grandchild. And I remember him telling me he grew up in an orphanage in St. Louis. He grew up in an orphanage because his parents died when he was young, and the only reason he got out of the orphanage was that his older brother needed him to come work on the farm. So he finally got out to go and work. But one of the things he always told me, for one thing, he said, never dye your hair. Of course, we know that fell by the wayside. But he also said, you need to read Les Miserables, because it's a story about how you can make something of yourself, even if you have mistakes in your life, and even if things didn't always go well. And it was just, and it's a big, thick book. I've probably read it 4 times because of what my grandpa said. And I love the story and the book, and I think that did spark a huge interest in me, which I was always interested in. I would take the Look magazine and Life magazine and write all the lines up above the print, because I would want to write that stuff. And that's how I taught myself to write and to read. And I did teach myself a lot to write and to read. And I guess it was always important to me, the written word and what people had to say. Yeah. And that one book really just blew me away, and I still read it occasionally.
So you talked a little bit about academic standards and some of the changes. One thing I do want to ask you too, though, because you were at the institution when the air base closed. And so is there anything you can speak to in regard to what that did to the college? Because many of the students who were there, my understanding is, were students who were the children of people stationed on the base.
And let's talk about what it did to Blytheville.
Okay.
Because it didn't just affect the college is a shining light in the city of Blytheville. It is something that most people there are very proud of, very excited about. And I think they felt the same way about the air base. And when it closed, it took a lot of people with it. The schools at Gosnell were, they always were full of air base kids. They had really sharp students that were always on the ball, and they still do, but still it's different. I think things cut down for a while at the college, and it scared us a little because we just knew something we were going to... I don't know that anybody ever thought we'd close up, but people were worried about numbers. And I hear now enrollment's way up in a lot of places, so that's good. But I remember when the base closed, we had a sense of almost doom, like, oh my, that's a big landmark, and now it's going away, and we'll lose a lot of people. And we lost a lot of diversity and a lot of viewpoints from different parts of the country and the world. And I think it was a really scary time for us in a way.
It's good to know, though, that early years were fed by that, though, because, just like with any military base, you've got people from all parts of the world. I remember
some of us going out to the base to teach classes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we did. We'd go out there to teach classes because that's what they needed. And we were accessible even then to people.
Well, and so before we kind of get in, because you will eventually have another transition in your career by becoming the dean, but before we get there, I don't want to leave your teaching just yet, because when you look at the courses that you taught, the purpose of them and things, did you have anything you really enjoyed? Like, I know for a fact you liked World Lit 2 quite a bit. But, just
because it lays the foundation for the way we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you give us a few examples
Yeah.
as to why that is?
The Enlightenment. It was a time when Jefferson and all of the founding fathers were in charge, and they were creating what we know as the Constitution and all of our documents, and they informed a lot of the way we looked at the world. And that's what's so scary right now, because we are sort of tossing all that by the wayside, it seems, and not looking to our forefathers as people who kind of had really they were so far ahead of their time, because here's why, and this is going to bother some people. They weren't so steeped in religion that they thought that everything had to revolve around religion, because they actually were deists. And a lot of people today will say, well, our founding fathers believed this and that. No, they didn't. Our founding fathers were deists. They were people who believed there was some power that got things going, maybe, but they were very reasonable, logical people who looked at the world scientifically and logically, and they didn't let religion color everything they did. So the Enlightenment's really important, because it reaches back to the Greeks in Athens and the way that government should be and the way that people should be treated. And so we have a lot of classic stuff that comes from that era. And I love to teach that. But another thing I love to teach, and this sounds crazy, but I took an African American lit course in college, maybe 2 or 3. And I really thought that Blytheville could use an African American lit class, because I thought people might want to come to that class to learn about what other people said, and what, instead of the canon, which is just the white European guys, let's talk about what African Americans were doing. And that was the most fun. I developed the course and I had all kinds of people in it, and we had great discussions, and it was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Do you think, too, that there was, because we go through periods where sometimes we find, like, in the political realm, certain disciplines may get, more critiqued than others. Do you think there's been periods where it was easier to talk about those things? And then periods where, even though, it's college, this is how people learn to think, by learning new things and things that might challenge their preconceived notions. Do you think that there's been eras where it's been easier to do that as a teacher, and then sometimes less so?
I think I'm happy to say that in nearly all of my career, I don't remember ever being stifled or told that I can't talk about certain things. I think I got free rein to do things the way I thought they should be done based on my education and knowledge. Now, I've seen since then that things have gotten pretty scary. Book banning is one of the scariest things on earth. You should be able to read whatever you want to read. And it may be true that parents can say, oh, my kids can't read this or that, but they cannot dictate that to other people's kids. And it really bothers me when we have book bannings and things like that, and banning of music. Any kind of art or any kind of thing that we do should be out there for anybody who wants to be exposed to it or wants to learn about it. It should not ever be squelched, and that is really a scary sign for me, that we have so many book bannings and so many things that teachers can and cannot say and do now. I just don't think I could survive in that environment, because I always had pretty much academic freedom.
And the freedom to think, too, and to kind of...
And to get students to think.
And encourage other people.
And sometimes they would say things that were outlandish, but you'd just address it, and you'd talk about it, and you'd say, well, how do you feel that way? And you'd say, well, did you realize that if you did that, this and that? And, you could discuss things without thinking they're going to go tell someone and I'm going to be on a list.
Well, so your career took a shift.
Mm-hmm.
You actually eventually became the Dean of Arts and Sciences. So can you talk a little bit about, why that appealed to you, the experience that you had from that role?
That was so much fun, and it was so interesting because what I got to do is open up my world a little. I had known humanities. I had known history teachers, English teachers, psychology teachers, etc., music, art. But now I got to deal with math and science people, and they're a different breed, and we're a different breed. But really, we all have some things in common, or we should have, and those should be that we want students to feel comfortable in our classrooms, to learn, to do better in their lives, to enrich their lives. And I think that most of the time, most people have good intentions in that area. And what I tried to do as a dean, and in fact it was given to me as an assignment, to try to bring the math and science people and the humanities people together as a whole and help us to all work together, knowing that we were all wearing the same jersey and that we all needed to have at heart the idea that students are our customers, or our reason for being, I'd like to say, because it's more of a reason for being than a customer to me. And I really enjoyed bringing all of the people together. And I even got to where I ate lunch with the science and math people most of the time because I thought that was one way to bring us all together. And I think I got pretty close to those people in many ways. And I think they respected me and liked me. And I think that on the whole, it was a great experience because I got to see a lot of point of views that I didn't used to have. And I got to kind of see why some people are the way they are and why they teach the way they do. Even though I didn't always agree with everything, I got to see why they did some of the things they did.
And do you think that's in part because of your humanities background?
I
that
think
genuine
that's
curiosity
very much in
of
part.
why people
yeah.
have the beliefs and things that they have.
Oh,
So,
definitely.
So looking at your career as a teacher and as a dean, and as a dean, you brought a lot of the things that made your students like you to the faculty that you oversaw, that kindness and that let's work together. So any standout moments that you want to put on record? Because working for you as I did for many years, we had a lot of fun, and you really were somebody who wanted to laugh and to bring about laughter, and you also got to oversee the education program and things like that. So
I actually got to hire the person who is now the
CAO.
The CAO,
right.
And he became the dean after I left, and so I feel like I had a lot of influence, and other people may not see it that way, but in my mind, I was very influential in the college, and I always worked for the college, and I always was a cheerleader for the college. I was an ambassador for the college as far as out in the community. I never badmouthed the college, even when I knew something wasn't what it should be. I tried very hard to always put the college in a positive light because I knew it could do so much for so many people.
Do you think, too, that you always had a little connection there because you started there?
Oh, yes. I loved it. And that felt like such an honor to me to be a person who could come back and teach at the place where I was taught. And I probably modeled a lot of my philosophy about education and teaching on the people who I loved the most there at that time, who were like Annie Heath, Mary Alice DeMint, Dr. Levenstein, DeBerry, just various people Georgia Smith. I cannot forget Georgia Smith. She was a sociology teacher. And while she could anger you and make you want to scream, she could open up your head in a way that you would think, okay, I see now. Yeah. I see what she's saying. And she really was influential. And she was an acquired taste. But she was someone who I really respected and looked up to because I thought she told the truth about a lot of things that people didn't want to hear.
As many sociology people have to.
And she was a black woman. And she wore dashiki and, she she was a huge influence, really, when I think back on it now. Norman Clay. Norman Clay was my art teacher, and I'm pretty artistic, but Norman Clay once said to me when he looked at one of my paintings, "You need to keep your day job." And I thought, I will never forget how honest he was with me.
Well, a few more things, because you also got to witness the growth of the college as
Oh, yeah.
like as an institution.
Yeah.
So you start off, the main building is open, which is mostly built because of the solar panel project. So what do you think of when you think of how it started to what it's like today?
Okay, we started in a high school where the teachers were actually getting it ready. During the time that I was at ANC as an instructor, I saw a huge library, beautiful library, built and even remodeled since before I left. And I saw State House Hall come about, which was where we took all the business aspects of the college nearly and put them over there where students could have a big center to go to get registered and do all the things they needed to do. I saw the wellness center, the Briggs Seaball Wellness Center, built. I saw the nursing building built. I'm telling you, it was one nice building when I came there, and before it was all over, it was spread out all over, and it felt like a college, and I was so proud of it, and I was so proud to say I worked there, and I loved the whole idea of it. And I loved when we changed the name to Arkansas Northeastern College. Dr. Sullins, I think, did that because when you looked up colleges, we would come up near the top. Yeah. I'm not sure that's why, but it sounded like that was something he would do. And I remember thinking that it turned into a real, what I consider college, where we had collegiate things happening. And I loved it. And I thought that many students were proud to come there. And my son even went there for 2 years. And he really liked it and went on to drive for UPS and all this. But he loved the size of it because it was kind of big to him. He had been to Steele High School. But it was small enough that he didn't feel, which he's never intimidated anyway, but he never felt like it was too big. It was perfect. And my niece, Chelsea, came with me one day to look at the college, and then she ended up canceling her plans for ANC and another college, for ASU and another college, and came with me for 2 years at ANC and got her associate, and she was so proud and loved it.
Well, I think something, too, you kind of touch upon is the fact that there's a lot of community support for this institution, and as well as a lot of alumni. You talk about an institution that has people who really believe in it. And I think earlier you talked about how it really is a beacon.
Yeah, it is.
And a shining.
I still hear people say, I heard a man say in the Dixie Pig the other day, he didn't even know me, I didn't know him, but he was talking to a group of other men. And he said, "Oh yeah, the college, it's one of the best things that ever happened to Blytheville. It's just, we're really proud of it. It just has done so much." And my niece even got to go to Japan because of the Nucor Yamato connection. And that opened up her world. She traveled the world after that.
Now, of course, looking at like the future community colleges, you start off as a student. It's more convenient to come there. What do you think the future is going to hold for the smaller colleges like ANC? Do you have any thoughts?
I'm afraid to say, I kind of think there's going to be fewer students there on the campus, and there's going to be more remote learning, INET. And that's good and bad, because some people do really good jobs with internet classes. You're one of those people. You and a couple of others really have that in hand, and I think that's great. But I do think the human connection that we have with students is really important. And I know you can have that online because you stay in contact with your students, but I'm old-fashioned enough to think that if it ever came to a time where I didn't have any students in a classroom, I don't know that I'd even I guess I would feel all right about it. I've taught internet classes.
Yeah.
I was one of the first people there that taught internet classes. Not a great job, but I still did it.
Yeah, I think they went from web warriors
Yeah.
to the process team
Yeah.
to
And it used to be
lots of-
pretty rudimentary. It was pretty much we're online, they're online, and we're teaching classes. But now it's so much more, I think it's so much better now from what I've heard.
So I'm going to ask you this question, but I want you to answer it from the perspective of a person who was a student,
Okay.
because you have had this amazing career. You worked on a PhD.
Got all the coursework
You got all
done.
the coursework done and everything, and you've made it. You were a dean when you retired. So, for some younger person out there who, let's say, loves the humanities, is not sure what the future holds, what sort of wisdom or what can you pass along to the younger people who maybe listen to this and think, here's someone from a small town, like me. She was
Rural.
able to do
I
all
was
of this
rural.
stuff. Yeah. So what kind of, advice would you have for...
Well, first of
for
all,
young
I would
people?
say do whatever you want to do. Major in whatever you want to major in. Look into the money and what kind of lifestyle you would have and how long the career could last and all that. But I would definitely say if you're thinking about the humanities, English or history or something, don't shy away from it because of what you've heard. Because I've had a very rewarding and rich and lovely life because I got a degree in English and I taught literature and writing and I taught people how to express themselves and I taught people how to read critically, and I feel like I've done something in the world, and I feel like I have a legacy as far as I don't ever go anywhere, even on the interstate going to Illinois or somewhere, where somebody doesn't see me in a bathroom or a restaurant and say, oh, you were my teacher or you taught my mom. And I never hear, I know that I probably made plenty of mistakes through the years, I'm sure of it, because everybody does. But as far as my overall career, I think being brave enough to go into what I really want to do has enriched my life for 50-something years in ways I could never have imagined.
Well, Deanita Hicks, I can't think of any better way to end this amazing interview. Thank you so much for being a part of the Oral History Project. Thank you so much for all of your dedication over the years to ANC.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it so much.